Hi, I'm Pastor Steve Talmage at Love of Christ Lutheran Church in Mesa, Arizona. And each week, Pastor Annette Christofferson and I try to provide a brief introduction to two of the assigned Bible readings for Sunday. In this lesson, we're going to look at Matthew 5, 1 to 12. It's the Gospel assigned for All Saints Sunday, November 5th, 2023. We've been in the Gospel of Matthew during this year A of the lectionary series that we follow here at Love of Christ. And we've been marching towards the end of Matthew. And here on All Saints Sunday, we revert back to the Sermon on the Mount. Just a reminder, as some of you have heard this before, but Matthew serves as a bridge connecting Jesus from what has gone before, meaning the Jewish scriptures, the words of the prophets, the law. The use of this was done to fulfill what the scriptures told is seen over and over again in Matthew. The primary audience of Matthew is Jews who have become followers of Jesus. The concept of Messiah is not what people were expecting. They were looking for a political revolutionary or a militant savior, and Jesus is anything but that. Kingdom of heaven is contrasted with the Roman Empire, which is the dominant reality in Matthew's time and Jesus' ministry time. There's 5 main sections in the book of Matthew: the Sermon on the Mount, which we'll look at the very beginning of, 5 to 7, the mission of the followers of Jesus, the disciples who will become apostles, chapter 10, primary teaching in parables or stories about what the kingdom of heaven is like, chapter 13. Chapter 18 is Jesus' disciples' relationships with each other and the roles that they have with him and the mission. And then the last chapters before the crucifixion and resurrection are dealing with the future, 24 to 25. Again, background: the book is attributed to Matthew, the former tax collector and disciple, but scholars, Bible scholars, do not agree. And that's not necessarily the main point, who wrote this book. It is attributed by the church as being authoritative in telling the good news of Jesus, his death and his resurrection for the sake of the world. Time frame is generally 50 to 100 CE, so anywhere from 20 years to 80 years, 70 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Most scholars place Matthew after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD and probably in the 85 to 95 Common Era. Matthew and Luke had access to a copy of Mark's Gospel, which scholars date at 60-65 prior to the fall of Jerusalem. And most scholars believe that Mark simply recorded Peter, the Apostle Peter's testimony of the good news. Scholars believe Matthew and Luke also had access to a circulating gospel account of Jesus called the Q document. No authorship is assigned, but the parallels are there, and so Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called synoptic gospels, meaning they use similar and identical wording. And so in my office I have a book called the Synoptic Gospels, and I can line up Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and you can see almost word for word that all 3 of them have the same thing. Not some variations, and that's what gets the scholars' attention. Why would Matthew say this, Luke say this, or Mark not say anything at all? Main themes: the Old Testament points forward to Jesus. So Jesus' appearance, Jesus' arrival, his birth, his being there with John the Baptist, all are in line with what the Jewish Bible, our Old Testament, pointed to. Jesus is the Messiah. He's the Son of God and the Son of Man. He's God's promised king. And in my Revelation study, you need to understand, in the Roman Empire, the emperor was also seen as the Son of God, the Savior of the world. Jesus both fulfills and transforms the law God gave to Israel through Moses. And so you see a lot of parallel between Jesus and Moses. And the people of God now are those who respond to the message of Jesus. So they are given the covenant with Jesus. They're given the responsibility and the mission to bring God's message and good news to the world. Why listen to Jesus? This is a classic quote from C.S. Lewis, who as a child turned away from God, became a noted atheist, and then went through a conversion experience a little later in life. And he was a well-regarded Oxford professor and scholar, wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, but his little book called Mere Christianity was an apology or a defense of why believing in Jesus. He writes, "You must make your choice. Either this man was, Jesus, was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not let that open to us. He did not intend to." So often we'll listen to people who don't believe in Jesus or see him as Messiah or Son of God, Son of David. He was a prophet, he was a good teacher, all that stuff. And Lewis is saying, when you read the Gospels, Jesus is not giving that as an option. You either believe who he is or you don't. Moving to the Mount, there on the Sea of Galilee, chapter 3, Jesus is baptized by John in the Jordan River, probably near the Dead Sea, south of the Sea of Galilee. There he is affirmed as God's Son. Chapter 4, 1 to 11, you have the temptation and testing of Jesus by the tempter, the tester, the devil in the wilderness. Again, a parallel of the Israelites in their wandering 40 years in the wilderness because they chose to follow their own appetites and desires rather than the ways of God and trust God. 4:12 to 25, John the Baptist is arrested. Jesus moves from Nazareth to Galilee. Capernaum on the shore of Galilee becomes a main mission center, and there he calls his first disciples. He calls 12 disciples. Why 12? That's to parallel the 12 tribes of Israel. Preaching, teaching, and healing as they reveal the reign and realm of heaven on earth is his primary ministry. So you see that. He's preaching, he's teaching, he's healing, all opening eyes and hearts and minds to God at work in their midst, revealing what the kingdom or reign or realm of God is like. The Sermon on the Mount, how are we to live as followers of the Messiah, Savior, Son of God, Jesus? It's not a simple set of rules. It's a call to be transformed in attitude and outlook from the inside out. Our lesson, 5:1 to 2. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying. All right, so Jesus is with crowds. He goes up to a mountain, Moses on a mountain, Revelation. He sits down, position of a rabbi who's going to teach with authority, and his disciples come, his students, his followers, and then he's going to teach primarily here his 3 to 4. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Let's break this up. Blessed, it means happiness or peace that is independent of our outward circumstances. So this is an internal quality that people experience when they're living in a right relationship with God. Meek, being humble and gentle toward others and God. This is not being, a person that people can run over or walk over. This is a person who has a sense of humility, and they have a spirit of gentleness toward others and God. Righteousness equals the quality of being right in the eyes of God, including one's character, their nature, their conscience, their attitude towards life and others, and their conduct, their action as they live out their world. How is their character, their conscience, their conduct lining up? And then what's coming out of their mouth? Command. So all of those are there. 7 to 10. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Mercy is a great biblical word. And again, mercy is not something God owes to us. By definition, mercy cannot be owed, but is something God extends in kindness and grace to those who do not deserve it. So when you and I are being merciful, we are responding with kindness and grace towards people who don't deserve it. This is the radical discipleship that Jesus calls us to. Where are we going to see God? With a pure heart. And in the midst of war happening in Israel, Palestine, in Ukraine, Russia, even the divisions that we see among politicians and families, we're called to be peacemakers, not agitators. We're not called to be dividers. We're called to be peacemakers. And then Jesus makes it very clear, if you're going to follow him, there is going to be persecution when you're doing the right thing. Sadly, when you're doing the right thing, following the practice and ways of God, of Jesus, it's counterculture. It is the opposite of what most people expect. It's not an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. It's being merciful. Even when you rightfully could think, I deserve to get even. 11 to 12, blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. We see this shift from the disciples' crowds to you and me. Blessed are you when people. Reward is the previous words of blessing, independent of our circumstances. So we're not going to get a gold crown in heaven. But if we live these qualities and characteristics that Jesus has just described, our life is going to be a blessed life, even if we are persecuted, reviled, and people accuse us falsely on his account. Because the world doesn't necessarily want to turn away from self to God. The world is bent inwards by what we call sin. And so when we are living a lifestyle that is counter to sin, to self-centeredness, to just our own self-interest, it makes people uncomfortable. It calls and invites them to think in a new and different way. As we enter into All Saints Sunday, it's an opportunity for us to listen carefully to the teachings of Jesus in the Beatitudes. And when you hear people say, I'm so blessed, think about what Jesus is teaching about the path of blessing. And really, isn't that the life of a saint? The one who is able to be happy and at peace with God and neighbor despite external circumstances, and living in a manner that reflects what the kingdom or reign of God is like by the attributes and characteristics that Jesus just listed. God bless you as you seek to faithfully follow Jesus and as we give thanks for the saints who've gone before us this Sunday. Take care.